Here's another big, big sentence for you. The best people are the broken people. I say that because as a teacher, teaching writing, like and I prefer working with writers who are broken. And what I mean by that is if you work with young guys, they know everything. They don't need a teacher because they've figured it out. They're 15 years old basically, or they're 25 years old with mentality and spirit of a 15-year-old, and and they know what literature is. They're James Joyce Jr. They know it all. And every time you tell them, hold on, look at what's the conflict here? What is the story about? They'll tell you, well, you don't need a conflict. You don't need, what? Look at this book. Look at that book. They don't. That works without what? It's a combination of things that they've read in the newspapers. If you read the arts and crafts, arts and entertainment pages, whatever, there's a review of some book, and some kind of pretentious book reviewer is going to say, this book has got to the core of the human being by not saying what it really means to say, or something like that. The empty spaces in the book are where the action really happens, or some nonsense like that. And so the young writer takes that at face value, and he gets the same kind of thing at university. When he reads James Joyce or Nabokov or something, and he takes that at face value, and he tries to reproduce that in his book. But what he doesn't realize is that reader who did whatever great trick he did, the best things in the book are the things that he doesn't say out loud, but he just implies. So trying to reproduce that effect, the young writer just doesn't say what the book is about. And so it's only negative space. It's only things that he's not saying that's happening. And so the reader doesn't have enough information to figure out what is happening. There's the holes in the space in the story, or in the whatever, in the text or the story or the atmosphere, the holes where the reader is supposed to think for himself and realize what's happening here, though it's not said, and can have a bing experience in this. Oh, I get what's happening, what's not being said, what's actually happening. But around the hole is in this text that tells you what's happening, and they forget that in this text around the hole, for something that has to describe something, where the reader begins to wonder what's missing here, what's really being talked about here, and then the reader figures out for himself what's not being said. But in order for that to happen, you have to say things that imply something else. But the young reader doesn't get that. The young reader just wants to leave things out, and so he writes a lot of prose that means nothing and just says nothing. And he says, well, yeah, but the reader is supposed to figure that part out. Well, let's see if I can tell this anecdote without revealing the actual story. There was a let's say there was a guy who wanted to write a story about a young man who felt like an outcast, and his family loved him. He was popular in school. He was doing well, and yet he ran away from home shortly before he was 18, and so at 16 or something. He ran away from home and went on some adventure, and that does it, because he felt like an outcast all his life, and he hated where he came from. But where he came from was great. Everything was fine. Everyone loved him. Everyone was nice to him. And I kept thinking, what don't we have to show that there's some kind of a motivation for escaping the world you live in, for having to run away and have a new life, and hating where you came from? Don't we have? Why is he doing this? And she said, well, no, but I don't want to say that part. I don't want to, I want to, and I kept saying, dude, it's not credible. I don't believe the story. I'm reading the story, and he's depressed, and he's suicidal, and he goes off and starts taking drugs because his life is so great. And I think I just don't believe it. I guess maybe it's possible somewhere in the world there's some guy who does that, but I don't think this guy would. I don't believe the story. So even after the first chapter, I'm not going to keep reading. And finally, after working, and he kept coming back to it. He kept coming back to this is how it works. I got to do this, and he wouldn't listen to me. And finally, he dropped this little tidbit of information without wanting to, kind of on the side, that the guy is handicapped. He has a major handicap of some kind. He's, muscular dystrophy or something. It's not what happened in the book, but let's say it's a major handicap. And suddenly, you realize why he's dissatisfied with his life, because he has this great life, but he's not actually a part of this life. But that was not shown. We didn't see that he has a major handicap that makes him different from people, even as other people love him and accept him. He's still different. He's still an outsider. There's nothing he can do about it because he has this major handicap, and he just can't, do things that other people do. But he didn't want to say that. He didn't want to say that part. And that was the part that would have actually made the book interesting. It's the part that would have created a conflict and justified the conflict and illustrated the conflict and told us what the conflict is about. Dude, you gotta tell us what it's about. You gotta tell us what the story is about. Okay, so I've completely forgotten what my actual sentence was that I was talking about. It was something. Hold on, I think I wrote it down. Oh, broken riders. Oh God, I went way off too far. Way too far. For what I'm trying to say. I like working with men and women who are broken because they've gone through this period of know-it-all youth, which is based on not knowing anything. So the less you know, the more you think you know, because you read one article about how to write, and so you'll get it. But of course, writing is much more complex. You read one article about life or being happy, or about politics, or about communism, capitalism, and you think you got it, but you don't got it because it's much more complex than this one book you've read. And I like the guys who have gone through that phase, have tried to change the world, or write the great book, or seduce the beautiful woman, or become the superstar or whatever, and then failed. And they just failed, and they're broken, and they're humbled, and they realize I haven't learned how to do this yet. I can't. It's just all my imagination. It's my own pretentiousness. My ego has been leading me around, but not actual skill or not actual ability. And so I have to slow down, take it step for step, learn what I'm doing, listen to the teacher who has done this, who's written the book, and can tell you how to do it, and do what he tells you to do. Have the humility to learn. That's the broken writer. That's the guy, and he's often some kind of a little bit depressed. A couple of guys I work with, they're fighting mental disabilities and mental illnesses. They've one guy has contracted and is fighting schizophrenia. He hasn't I don't know if he contracts schizophrenia, but he was diagnosed at some point with schizophrenia, and he's fought it for years and years, and finally he's come to the point where he's managed to force himself to take his medication, basically. And now he's trying to build his life up again. And so he's been to the bottom. He knows how to fail. he knows the bad things in life. He he knows he can survive it, but he knows he can fall back into it. And so he doesn't want to do that. And so he wants to do it right. He doesn't want to pretend like he has all the answers. He wants to learn. And so when I tell him, you got to write this, you got to do, where's the conflict? What are you doing when you're writing this? What's going on here? He will begin to say, well, no, but I think it's, and then he'll call me back or write me in and say, I thought about it, and I think you're right. I think, and I got this email from him the other week. I've decided to go a new course, and of course, when people say that, I'm thinking, well, okay, he's going to get another teaching writer. He's going to stop, learning from me, or fire me as a teacher. And he says, I'm going to go another course. I'm going to do everything you tell me to do. Not everything, but just 90% or something. I'm going to listen to you, and. Because he's a broken guy, because he knows how to fail, and he knows that everything that he thought about life and success and writing and whatnot has been to a large part a lie or just insufficient, superficial knowledge, and that he has to first learn and go through the hard process of learning and changing before he can succeed. And when you do that, and I see that often, usually in men and women who are in some way broken and want to use the last years of their lives, however many years those are, to make up for all the mistakes they made and maybe make something out of their lives in the end. Broken writers, broken people. Have a good day. Have a productive week, folks.